the problem isn't Trump. The problem is all of us. And the problem starts with shame. How does shame work? So as you know, like many things that Trump says and does, most people, or many people like me, would find shameful to do it. It would be shameful for me to sell a mem coin or whatever, knowing that they're all a scam and that it's a pyramid scheme and they all eventually go down. It would be a shame for me to start a university and charge money for a service I know that I won't deliver. It would be a shame for me to build a building and not pay the contractors. All these things would cause me shame. But you don't have to have shame to live to operate in the real world. That's just the way life is. I mean, there's always a balance between how much shame we're going to tolerate and what we'll accept as a society or what we'll accept as a person. So where did it go away? Now, 30 years ago, so I'll talk about when I was younger. When I was younger, if you went up to a congressman or a senator, for instance, and you said, oh, you voted on Bill Z because you got all this money from the lobby, paying you to vote this way on Bill Z. And they would say, no, this is really what we think. Or, yeah, they paid, but it's just a coincidence, has nothing to do with it. They would defend themselves. They would feel a teeny bit of shame for you mentioning it. They would recognize that I expect them to feel some shame, or anybody should expect them to feel some shame. Shame is a social concept, a construct, I should say. The shame isn't based on my personally saying to the congressman, oh, you voted this way because the lobbyist paid for you. The shame is the congressman knowing that everybody feels that way and that people wouldn't vote for him or for her if they knew he had done this, because that is a shameful act. Shame is a social agreement. Shame is when we do something that we know is socially unacceptable. So how has that changed? Well, no longer can you go up to a congressman or senator or most elected people and say, hey, you voted for this and you should be ashamed because of X, Y, and Z or whatever your reasons are. It wouldn't mean anything to them. All that matters to them is getting voted, getting elected. So their feeling is like, listen, you're naive. I'll say whatever I need to say to get elected, and then I'll think about doing good things and whatever. So really, this thing, the shame thing, that's just impractical. You don't understand how the world works. That's just the way things are. So, that's what we have as government in a case. Now, the question is, are the politicians to blame for not feeling shame for these things, for voting for things that the public doesn't want? Like the public doesn't want anti-abortion nationwide pretty much. The public wants gun control nationwide pretty much. But if you go to a politician, many of them, you say, I want gun control, these things are a single tax form or whatever. There's no shame anymore. Everybody agrees that everybody's in it for themselves. So that's what's happened in the political sphere. So now both parties, because they don't get elected on principles, because in a sense the opposite of shame is virtue, in a way, right? So if you don't have many things to be shameful for, you're generally a virtuous person, and that's why people would vote for you. That's the way it was 30 years ago. So when I was young, I forget the exact cases, but I forget which politician, and he kissed some girl and he was out of the presidential race right there. The littlest things that you could do that were shameful would get you put out of the race, because that shame meant you weren't virtuous. So anyway, that's been going on for decades. So then what happened is that, people wanted to be called a certain name, right? So let's take gender things. And I'm not saying it's wrong, or I'm not making a specific judgment of that. But if somebody says, okay, well, you have to call me he, she, they, it, whatever, right? You're basically telling the person that you should be shamed if you do something that I disagree with. Not the whole everybody disagrees with, I disagree with. Because there's no common social agreement on who a he, she, they, or whatever is, right? So if you put it in a personal way, if you're saying, okay, I personally will judge you. That's what I'm saying, like personal fascism. I judge whether you're a good person or not on the way that you call me. Well, then how does shame operate in general, right? If shame now becomes something that we personally define, if I personally define that you should feel ashamed if you call me he when I want to be called she or they, where's the social thing? It weakens the whole social idea of shame. So everybody gets to decide what shame is. So when Trump does something, he can just say, hey, I want to be called they. I want to do this. So I'm doing this. And, I shouldn't feel any shame. We should all just, do what we want. And so we are all doing what we want. Trump is doing what he wants. Many people, and then there's the other thing of shame, like that we have to agree that some historical figure is an anti-Semite or a racist, right? So now we have to agree on what, like on every person. If I talk to a person and they've decided that George Washington or whatever was a racist for whatever reason, that I have to agree that they're a racist. And if I don't agree with the racist, I should feel shame. I should feel shame because we stole all the land from the Indians. I should feel shame because I'm a white male. I get this all the time. You're just a white male. I didn't choose to be white. I didn't choose to be male. But the problem is that, should I feel shame because you personally decided? Or has whole society decided that every white male like me should feel some shame before making any opinion about an historical figure? So this is where we're at. We can't, the biggest problem to me with this personal fascism is it doesn't give agency to anybody else, right? So, I mean, if you're basically saying, oh, you have to call me by what I want, or you have to recognize this historical figure in the way that I recognize them, where's the agency for me to have virtue, right? I can only have virtue on an individual basis. I can't have virtue on a society as part of a society. So I basically can't knock Trump for not being virtuous when there is no. I can't say to Trump, hey, listen, we've all agreed as a society that you should be ashamed, because we don't all agree. Everybody defines it individually, and we've allowed this as a society to become the norm. And why is that? I think it's just because we're far after World War II, and we forget what happens when you don't allow society to set what is shameful and what isn't. And so after World War II, everybody was ashamed that they had gotten themselves into a war that got so many people killed and maimed and injured and lives destroyed. We as humans felt ashamed that we had done this. We, not any specific individual, we. But then as history went on, it's more like, well, it was Hitler's fault, it was Mussolini's fault, and it's Stalin's fault. And then, today it's the same thing. Like the problem with society was, this person was a racist, or this person was a, anti-Semite or whatever. But no, we all did it. We all were involved in World War II and the Holocaust and everything, one way or another. So anyway, what I'm saying here is until we as a society can get back to agreeing that we will have a base level of things that we find shameful. So for instance, telling the truth should be shameful, right? It should be shameful to tell a known lie. And so, the politicians, when they get up there and they get into debates, the New York Times, whatever, the papers will say, well, we've checked these facts and they don't really matter. That's not enough. It's not enough for them to personally say, oh, well, it's not enough for the paper to say, okay, well, we checked this fact and this fact is right or wrong. That person has to be personally ashamed not to report that it's a lie on the spot, and not to question the person that's a lie on the spot. When Trump says he's going to take over Gaza, that we're going to own Gaza, or we're going to take over Greenland, everybody in the room has to feel ashamed to let him say it, and has to immediately say no, has to immediately call their congressman, senator, Republican, or Democrat and say, How are you not ashamed? I am ashamed that he said that. That the world is looking at me like I want Greenland or I want Gaza. Like I'm ashamed to say that. And I feel we just killed 40,000 people or whatever. Right? Where is that? Until everybody recognizes that same shame, until everybody acts on it in the same way, nothing will change because everybody is agreed. Oh, do what you want. And, we'll just, everybody will have their individual markers for shame. Everybody will have their own personal fascism. And we'll just, just go on. So, anyway, that's my explanation. Just, as I've said many times, I think we're in the 1930s right now. We're in World War III. We're going to have decades of this. I really hope we don't. But I just don't see any option because this stuff was obvious in the two world wars. It was obvious in the Peloponnesian War when Plato wrote the Republic. The Republic was an explanation of how did Greece get into this Peloponnesian War with Sparta. And he says democracy, because basically the individual selfishness of all the citizens will get politicians. They'll tell them anything that they want to hear for them to settle grudges, for them to feel superior, whatever. And that's where we are, again, in history over and over and over again. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Till later.